In later life, Yeats, who had written in such a smitten way about dancers, made what was for him quite a confession. A most astonishing thing. 70 years have I lived. Hurrah for the flowers of spring, for spring is here again. 70 years have I lived. No ragged beggar man. 70 years have I lived. 70 years man and boy, and never have I danced for joy. All through a lifetime of poetry, whether it was a child dancing on the wind or a dancer becoming the pattern created, he evinced as a fellow artist those moments of self-absorption, and he admired them without reservation. Even the child dancing on the beach morphs decades later into Helen of Troy, suddenly, unaccountably dancing for her own pleasure and for nobody's pleasure but her own. That the topless towers be burnt and men recall that face, move most gently if move you must in this lonely place. She thinks, part woman, 3 parts a child, that nobody looks. Her feet practice a tinker shuffle picked up on a street. Like a long-legged fly upon the stream, her mind moves upon the silence. Attention is the self-absorption, the self-conquest of art, and it is a kind of prayer. The fly could be trapped on the watery stream, or it could be relishing its experience as an image of God's free creation, the God who created by breathing on the waters to make life. One thing is clear to Yeats: the earliest moments of creation, like those of a child, are impulsive, they're only half conscious, and they're not deliberated. Helen is unnamed in Longlegged Fly. She has no conscious intention of achieving anything in her absent-minded dance. Like a fisherman in one of Yeats's earlier poems, not caring is her hope of finding success. Maybe I shall catch a fish, if but I do not seem to care. The dance is really a thinking of the body more than of the mind. She thinks, part woman, 3 parts a child, that nobody looks, as her feet dictate the agenda and have an agency all of their own. So I think this is one of the answers to the question put at the end of Leda and the Swan, at the end of Among School Children, about the knowledge a person puts on at the moment when greatness is achieved. And the answer is very little. The greatness of the dancing Helen must never be conscious of itself as such, just as Joyce's Leopold Bloom, though aware of the possibility of previous lives, never thinks for a moment that he could be the reincarnation of Odysseus. Heroism cannot be conscious of itself as such, and the creative moments of blessedness are given to those who don't carry knowledge about the sources of the power they have. Even the movements of Michelangelo, his hand moving to and fro on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, even those movements are instinctive. His hand moves to and fro, more a matter of body than of mind. And yet what is being depicted is the scene where 2 fingers are in an act of electric connection, just the kind of connection which the COVID pandemic has made impossible to contemplate now, or at least impossible to do. Unlike Yeats, Joyce was, by all accounts, a very keen dancer. And like modern dancers, and like the figures featured in Yeats's poems, Joyce seems to have preferred to dance alone, to create his own space, as he did, for instance, in what was called his famous spider dance, which made him illustrious in a lot of the beer halls of Zurich, and which appears to have had elements of the John Cleese extended leg silly walk about it. It's certain that his daughter Lucia inherited her love of dance on the father's side, and yet her fate wasn't unlike that of Margot Ruddock, who tried, as Yeats noticed, to escape melancholy through the dance. If strange men come from the house to lead her away, do not say that she is happy being crazy. Lead them gently astray. Let her finish her dance, let her finish her dance. Ah, dancer, ah, sweet dancer. So as he grew older, Yeats seemed ever more haunted by this image. And in a Crazy Jane poem, he has Jane grown old looking at the dancers. There is something very voyeuristic about the poet's contemplation, or is it Jane's contemplation, of youthful dancers as depicted on an ivory carving. Involvement with them would be pointless, so intent are the dancers on one another. All that can be concluded is that love can seem, like art, as cruel as a lion's tooth. Yeats always believed that sexual love had an element of spiritual hate about it. The self and the anti-self are in eternal conflict. So in the dance, the masculine self hates the feminine self and endlessly postpones the moment of confrontation, only to discover that this confrontation was its deepest desire. So in the poem, the dancer swings so hard out of the beloved that death might result. And when the woman dancer, perhaps in play, draws a knife to strike him dead, Jane envies this energy, this sheer intensity. The subject, as so often with dance, is sexual orgasm and whether it might be faked. Did he die, or did she die? Seemed to die, or died they both? God be with the times when I cared not a thronin for what chanced, so that I had the limbs to try such a dance as there was danced. Love is like the lion's tooth. This is, once again, the nonchalance, the not caring that attends artistic as well as sexual creation. And the ivory image is cruel, not to those caught up in the action, but really to the onlooker, such as the elderly Jane, who can only look on now in envy. Art could be a form of violence, providing an image that is cruel to jealous onlookers who lament the loss of body's energy, and cruel in its imperviousness, its indifference to the lethal effect it may have. It is the dance that brings on the violence of the scene and its effects on the aged Jane.